My ex-wife and her new man tried breaking into my house. Now they're both in jail. I'm 41, male, and I work as a mechanic in a small Midwestern town. My divorce was finalized just 6 months ago, and it was a relief to walk away with some dignity intact. My ex-wife, Jill, and I had argued nonstop for nearly 2 years. Right after the paperwork went through, I decided to make a fresh start by buying a modest three-bedroom home near my workshop. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like a solid milestone in reclaiming my life. For the first few weeks, I took pride in every corner of that house. Freshly painted walls, newly installed kitchen cabinets, a small backyard with enough space for barbecues. It was my safe haven, a place I could live on my own terms, away from the drama that consumed my marriage. I didn't think I'd ever have to deal with Jill again, aside from a few straggling financial matters. However, strange things started happening. I'd come home from work and notice that certain items weren't where I left them. Nothing huge, but the couch pillows out of place or mail spread across the coffee table. Initially, I thought I was just forgetting where I put things. Then one evening, I found the front door slightly ajar, even though I was locked it that morning. When I mentioned this to a coworker, he joked about ghosts. But something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining it. A few days later, I caught a glimpse of Jill's car parked down the street. It disappeared a moment later, but it was unmistakable. Same license plate, same dent near the taillight. Confused, I tried convincing myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe she was visiting someone nearby. But tension nagged at me, refusing to let go. Jill had always been the entitled sort, convinced the world owed her the best of everything. Her new boyfriend, Jake, from what I heard, shared that mindset, like they were some golden couple deserving of endless perks. During the divorce proceedings, she demanded outrageous sums of alimony, complaining it wasn't fair I'd upgraded my life while she had to start over. The judge didn't buy her story, and she walked away with less than she wanted. I figured that would be the end of her meddling. Clearly, I was wrong. One fateful afternoon, I returned from a busy day at the shop. My usual routine was to let myself in, toss my keys on the kitchen counter, and head for a quick shower. This time, my key wouldn't fit the lock. I tried again, jiggling it carefully, still nothing. My heart pounded with apprehension. I rang the doorbell, and after a tense pause, the door cracked open. Jake stood there, glaring. "This isn't your house anymore," he snapped and slammed the door in my face. I stood on the front porch, stunned, gripping my bag of groceries. Was this some twisted prank? As I processed what had just happened, I heard Jill's voice from inside, telling him to keep me out. Realizing the locks must have been changed, I felt a surge of disbelief and anger. How had they even gotten in? More importantly, what on earth made them think they had the right to take over my property? I pounded on the door, shouting, "Open up, this is my house." Jack cracked it open slightly and sneered. "Not anymore." Then he shoved me back, causing me to stumble off the porch. I heard laughter from inside, and Jill piped up, "Maybe you should have paid me more alimony." The door slammed shut again. Stunned, I stepped backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. My heart raced as I circled around the house, checking windows. Every entry point was locked or barricaded. I peered through the living room window and saw them settling onto my couch, flipping through my TV channels like they owned the place. This was beyond bizarre. It was outright trespassing. But the moment I pulled out my phone to call the police, a chill ran down my spine. Was there a chance this could backfire on me somehow? Could they spin this as me harassing them? Anger won out over caution. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The dispatcher was calm, instructing me to wait outside and let officers handle it. Within 10 minutes, two squad cars rolled up. I felt a flicker of relief. But that relief vanished when Jill stepped onto the porch, hands on her hips, complaining to the officers that I was harassing her in our home. Our home? She'd never even been on the title. I had purchased this place well after the divorce was final. The police asked for documents, so I showed them the deed and my driver's license, pointing out that her name was nowhere on it. She tried to argue that she had rights due to our past marriage, claiming I had promised her a house. The officers exchanged glances and asked her to provide proof. Of course, she had none. Jake then stepped in, ranting that I had stolen the house from her because of the divorce. It was so absurd, I nearly laughed. But Jake's tone was aggressive, and the cops quickly told him to back off. It looked like things might be resolved peacefully, but Jill's entitled streak flared up. She started screaming about how I owed her better living conditions, that I was cruel to force her onto the streets. Jake threatened to get their lawyer friends involved. Meanwhile, the officers were trying to maintain order. After a few tense minutes, it seemed the police had heard enough. They instructed Jill and Jake to vacate the premises immediately, warning that any further trespassing could lead to arrest. They sulked off to their car, cursing at me and spouting nonsense about revenge. The officer suggested I change the locks, yet again, or hire a security system to avoid future break-ins. I thanked them, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and lingering apprehension. I thought that was the end of it. However, just 2 days later, I came home from work to find them both inside again. This time, they had barricaded the front door with a heavy dresser. Looking through the window, I saw boxes. My boxes strewn about, as if they'd tossed my belongings aside to make room for their stuff. Rage bubbled up in my chest. How dare they? I immediately called the police a second time. But when the officers arrived, Jill and her boyfriend refused to come out. They shouted obscenities through the locked door, insisting they had every right to stay. One officer pounded on the door, warning them they were committing criminal trespass. Jake roared back, "We have squatters' rights." I couldn't believe my ears. Squatters' rights typically don't apply to individuals breaking in, changing locks, and forcibly removing the legal owner. Yet they were desperately grasping at any excuse. At that point, the officers requested backup. More squad cars arrived, lights flashing in my quiet neighborhood. Neighbors stood on their porches, murmuring in confusion as the standoff escalated. I felt humiliated, but also determined. I refused to let these two con artists push me around in my own home. Eventually, the police gained entry through a side window with the help of a locksmith I'd called. Inside, they found Jill and her boyfriend barricaded in the master bedroom, hurling personal insults at the officers. After a tense half hour, both of them were forcibly removed from the property in handcuffs, ranting about how unfair it all was. Jill shouted over her shoulder, "I'll see you in court. You can't get away with this." Jake spat accusations that I'd bribed the cops. Meanwhile, I stood in my front yard numb. Nothing felt real. This was like a scene out of a twisted TV drama. That night, I spoke at length with a local prosecutor. They confirmed I had grounds to press criminal charges for trespassing and breaking and entering. On top of that, there could be charges related to assault or harassment if I chose, especially since they physically shoved me off my own porch. I remember exhaling a shaky breath. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, but the other part realized they wouldn't stop unless I fought back legally. So I pressed charges. The next week was a whirlwind of legal paperwork. I had to provide the deed, proof of purchase, plus sign affidavits describing how they broke in and changed the locks. The prosecutor's office compiled it all with assistance from the police reports. Jill's prior angry outbursts also didn't help her case. Then, to top it off, Jake had a string of petty crimes in his past, from vandalism to credit card fraud. It looked like a slam dunk case from a legal standpoint. On the day they were arraigned, I showed up in court feeling both anxious and resolute. Jill glowered at me from across the room, Jake whispering furiously to her. Their lawyer attempted to spin a story about how I had promised them accommodation after the divorce, claiming it was some handshake agreement. My lawyer coolly presented the timeline, showing I purchased the home long after the divorce settlement, with no mention of any shared ownership. Still, they kept trying. Their sense of entitlement was astounding. Jake even interrupted the judge, insisting that I'd exploited Jill financially. The judge quickly shut him down, warning him about contempt of court if he continued. Hearing them squirm was oddly satisfying. But the real satisfaction came when bail was set high and they realized they'd likely remain in custody unless they paid up. Neither of them seemed to have the funds. In the end, the court found enough evidence to move forward with the criminal trial. Jill and her boyfriend both spent a few weeks in jail awaiting further proceedings. I discovered through mutual acquaintances that they tried everything to negotiate an out-of-court settlement, but I refused. I was done playing nice. The day they pled guilty to avoid a harsher sentence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. They receive a combination of probation, fines, and longer jail time for Jake due to his criminal record. Walking out of the courthouse that evening, I was exhausted but strangely at peace. I'd had doubts about pressing charges, worried it might make me look vindictive or escalate tensions. But in the end, I realized they left me no choice. They broke into my home, humiliated me in front of my neighbors, and showed zero remorse. It was time for real consequences. Back at the house, I finally replaced every lock and installed a robust security system. My father helped me repair the damages they left behind: scratched floors, broken window sills, and torn up furniture. Little by little, I reclaimed my space. Each improvement felt like another step away from the chaos, a reminder that I had the right to protect what was mine. Looking back, the entire ordeal taught me that sometimes people refuse to respect boundaries unless forced by law. Jill's entitled attitude convinced her she deserved my property just because we'd once been married. Jill and Jake tried every dirty trick they could muster: squatters' rights, fake promises, intimidation. In the end, the legal system reminded them that actions have consequences. Nowadays, I enjoy a quiet routine, tinkering in my garage workshop and grilling in my backyard on weekends. I keep a close circle of friends who supported me through the chaos. Occasionally, I'll hear from distant acquaintances that Jill still blames me for ruining her life, but I don't lose sleep over it. She made her choices, and I made mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.